Okay. Is everybody here then, I guess? um, so I'm going to talk today about my recent adventure, if you will call it that, of running the Tahoe 200, which is a 200-mile race around Lake Tahoe, and with a little extra distance thrown in to bring it up to a nice round number. Mostly a trail run through the mountains. So what is the Tahoe 200? It's a 200-mile run. It's a single loop run, and I'm going to say run. Run is a very questionable term here because most of the time we're nowhere near running. The cutoff is 100 hours in order to get to be considered a finisher of the event, and that boils down to 4 days and 4 hours. And so it's mostly single track. You got about 35,000 feet of elevation gain, and this is the third year that it's been run by just an amazing person, Candace Burt. She's really cool. Yeah. So this is basically what the course looks like. This is spoilers. I did finish, but this is what the course looks like off of my Strava after having patched everything and spliced it back together. We started over there on the west side of Lake Tahoe at Homewood ski area, and then ran up into the mountains and then stayed pretty much in the mountains until we got back to where we started several days later. And did I mention it wasn't exactly a flat course either, so this wasn't just running down on the road. Some of these climbs were were rather tough. Especially some at the end when your legs are pretty shot and your feet are definitely shot. I've done worse mountains here in Colorado, but never for this long. The high point of the course was about 9,700 feet. So it's a pretty hefty elevation. Luckily, since I live in Colorado and do a lot of running here, elevation didn't really come into a factor for me, but a lot of people weren't quite so fortunate. So some of you may not be aware, I realize not everybody here runs ultras. Apparently that's, go figure. So technically it's anything longer than a marathon, though people generally consider, it's got to be like a 50K, which is about 31 miles, which really starts what people call an ultra. A lot of the ones that I like are on trails and in mountains, and it's a great way to see a lot of distance. So instead of going backpacking for like a 3-day trip, I can just finish it in an afternoon and go home and sleep in my bed. Although that didn't work out here. Typically, you'll have longer distances between aid stations. I don't know if you've done other races like 10Ks and 5Ks where you've got water every couple miles. In an mountain ultras, it could be 4, 5, 10 miles between aid stations. And in this particular race, it was much further than that. And so you're going to end up using a pack, one of the things I'll talk about just briefly. And for long runs, most of us normal people are going to be running well into the night. Some of the super elites and super fast guys can finish a 100-mile race in like 14, 15, 16 hours, which I am not even close. The guy who ended up winning this race beat me by a full day and a couple of hours. So he beat me by 27 hours, and I felt great about my time. That's just, there's such a difference. And it's one of these things where you realize most of the time they aren't going that much faster, but they're, hey, it's an integration problem. That little bit of lead just adds up over hours and hours. And so you're going to do night running through the day, and the temperature's going to change a lot on you. You just have to be ready for all that. A lot of the races I do, sometimes I have a high, what they call a DNF or did not finish rate. The one I did in Black Hills this year, like 63% of the people who started did not finish, but that one ended up being it was extremely hot. It was over 100 degrees, and it just beat people down to the point where I almost missed one of the cutoffs and had to really run in to make the cutoffs. And they'll have cutoffs at these aid stations you have to make where they'll just say your race is over. We can't keep the volunteers out here. We can't keep the course open. You got to finish at some point. So, but we have a saying, it's like, DFL, which stands for, darn freaking last, or dead fucking last, if you want to go that way, is better than not finishing, which is better than not signing up, did not start. And these things are really about control, and you got to be in control of your pace. You got to really monitor what your body's doing. You got to make sure you're on top of your hydration, how much you're eating. You can't eat too much or too little. And then in these really long events, you got to do something about like how much rest you get. That was one of my big problems I had in this course before was sleep. And then for a lot of us who are mid-pack, back-to-pack kind of people, it's not really you against the other runners, it's you against the course. And you'll get a real sense of community because a lot of times people will stop and like if they notice that you're having problems or you're sitting down or whatever, people stop, they're on a race and just like, hey, how's it going? You doing okay? And that happened to me several times in this race, and I've helped other people with this race and other races. So it's a really great sense of community. Another thing that you'll see in running in ultra marathons are pacers. Oh man, how come they're guys taking out my memes there? No. Yeah. Anyway, it says ultra marathon pacers. They're babysitters essentially, because that's what they do. In most races, they're not allowed to do anything like physically to help you. They can't they're not supposed to push you up a hill or have a tow bar or anything like that. And in most races, they also aren't supposed to carry any stuff for you. It's okay if they hold something for a little bit, or, you say, can you open this pack of gels, which I am way too tired to open myself. It's just too much of a task. You can ask them for little things like that. But like at Leadville, 100 is one of the few exceptions where it's encouraged that they carry your stuff. And they call that muling. And that's great because Leadville and the mining tradition and mules. But most races, this one included, they're not allowed to carry your stuff. So they're there for emotional support. They can help you from getting lost, which happened. They can straighten out some hallucinations for you, which happened. And then, in the case of my friend, Dr. Nikki, we would riff and laugh on jokes for hours. So we can come into aid stations just laughing because, we get along great and it's just super fun. And then my wife, who says, nah, come on, you're not sitting down again, get up. I'm kicking my ass for 20, 30 miles if need be. But, one of the jobs of a pacer is to say, they have to be tough on you. They have to say, look, you're not giving up. There's plenty of time. You haven't hit a cutoff. Your leg doesn't look broke to me. Get up and keep going. And so they're really, really, really important for that. So this is my thoughts on the race. And so last year, I did not complete it. I made it to 160 miles, and my will to go on was just done. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll get into some of that later. But this is kind of my philosophy in life, that occasionally I'm going to try things that I get in way over my head, and that's how you learn. You jump in deep into the pool, and occasionally you're not going to make it. You have to have a lifeguard come get you. But that's what I did last year. But this year, that was my I went out there. I didn't have enough people to support me. Some people can do this without anybody. I'm not one of those people. Yeah, it kind of failed to grok, okay, yeah, it's 200 miles. Well, what does that mean? Just you don't realize, okay, this is day 3 and I'm still going and I still got a long ways to go. The distance between the aid stations in this race was twice that of normal 100-mile races. Normal. I didn't get enough sleep. I took too much caffeine. Usually on my 100-mile races, if I start getting really tired, I'm like, well, just down another coffee or take another no-dose and you'll be fine because you'll be done in a few hours. It's no big deal. But that stuff added up and it kept me from sleeping well. And I was just going crazy and seeing stuff everywhere. Not a good scene. And then, the willpower just said, nah, we're done at mile 160. It's a good effort, but ultimately I signed up for a Tahoe 200, not Tahoe 165. So this was, again, my meme ruined by these people. One does not simply run 200 miles. You got to have a good plan. So how do you get ready? Well, you run a lot. I ran every day. I started a streak last year. I ran every day calendar year last year, every day this year right until the race. And then I've since stopped my streak, but really for other reasons. So in about a year and a half, I ran at least a mile, but typically like 3 to 5 miles a day every day. I did a lot of races, which I think are great training because they really push you. So I did the Colorado Half Marathon, the Boulder, and so the Boulder 10K, Dirty 30 50K, Rebel Marathon, and Black Hills were all within a week of each other. I had one week long break in there, and so that's how I got ready for this. And the Black Hills really was a very tough race. My friend and I were like some of the final finishers. It took us 33 and a half hours. The cutoff was 34, and we came in just walking, and we were happy to cross the finish line. 2 days essentially out in 100-degree weather was pretty tough. And then I did this race up in the Never Summer Mountains near Walden, which was 100K. What's great about it, it was relatively short. We could finish and go sleep in a bed, which was great, but it was a good workout and a good chance to get up in some high elevation and just a real enjoyable event. I did a lot of mountain training runs. There's the Boulder Skyline Traverse, which is hitting all the 5 peaks here along Boulder. We did the Pawnee Buchanan Loop. I did it with some friends here at the office. That was a good, 27 miles, and you could kind of do it. For me, it was at kind of a relaxing pace and got to kind of take it easy and try out some of my new gear and, filter some water. And that was a lot of fun. And then I paced a buddy at Hard Rock for 32 miles. And Hard Rock is a big race down in southwestern Colorado. I don't know if it's the hardest race. It's hard to qualify these things, but it's definitely up there. It's got a lot of elevation climb. It's a really high altitude, and the climbs are really intense and really tough. It was really good. I paced a guy that I had met at Tahoe the previous year and got to cover a good 32 miles. And that was a good day at kind of what I would consider more of a race pace, which is slow, as you'll see. And then I did a lot of back-to-back long runs. I did a week where I did three runs that were 20 miles long. Just had to have them because you had to have that constant, because you have to face that getting up the next day and doing another long run. And then we had a trip. We had to go out to Sydney for work, and I was like, well, I still need to get in shape. And so I found a 17-mile race, and then we did a 20-mile hike the next day, and that was all good, just time on feet. It really worked out well. And then these are the books that I read. I'm not going to go over all of them, but most of them are. I was kind of wondering, what happened to all the fiction reading I used to do? And I realized, oh yeah, I read all these other books that really aren't fiction. The last one is not actually a book. It's on Netflix. It's great. It's called The Barkley Marathons, and it's a fantastic documentary. It is. I mean, I've watched it 4 times, so it's a really good. It's about a race that may be in my future, but I think it's a little crazy. Watch it. It's highly entertaining. Yeah, and he did a lot of mental prep. I thought through a lot of what could happen in advance. You're out hiking. You're kind of play these games with yourself. Oh, what would happen? What would you do right now if it started raining, or if your shoelace broke, or you twisted your ankle, or whatever. And I'd also do it during my workouts. So I do a lot of speed workouts. Once a week we have a session. Scott's part of that group, and times when those got tough, I'm like, okay, are you going to fall down at this moment? Is this the moment you're going to give up and back off the speed? I'm like, no, because when you're out there, you're going to have to keep going. It's going to be uncomfortable. This may hurt a little. And you have to learn to embrace suffering, as they like to say. And so that's something I did. I did that constantly throughout the year. So here we are, 2016. It's a new hope. We're going to try it again. These things, I got a more commitment from my crew. People were able to come out for longer. They were able to stay the whole time. One of the things that happened in 2015 is I got pacers and crew for a little bit, and then they had to go home. And then I was like, oh, I'm by myself again. And they didn't have someone to tell me to keep going and keep after it. And if you have something and you lose it, that's worse than not having it at all, really. But I also said, okay, I've got a better mental state. I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to give my best effort. And if I fail again, that happens. It's just, I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to worry well, you're going to look like an idiot because you signed up for a 200-mile race and you didn't finish it. because that played heavily on me in 2015. And I thought, well, I'm just really going to start slow. And I thought I started slow last year. No. This year started even slower. I mean, I forced myself to the back of the pack, and I'll show some of that more later. But I just really thought, okay, I'm just really going to take it easy. No more jogging or running than necessary, just on paces where it's really, really nice. And the plan was definitely, and I had to reinforce this, like get more sleep, be more in control of that, and don't try to just make up for lack of sleep using caffeine, because that really hurt me. And so the idea was to avoid any daytime caffeine except for my cup of coffee in the morning until like the third day. And then like, okay, all limits are off. Just do what you need to do. And I wrote a list, like a doc that I had on my phone that I could refer to. It's like, this is my, like, things are going wrong, refer to this. And I got that here in a second. And I put together so I've got a playlist of songs I listen to when I'm running. And it's like, I don't know how many hours, but there's just so many songs in there. But then I pared that down to another list of songs that really motivate me, really speak to, when things are going bad. It's like, you just want to hear the same awesome songs over and over again. And to me, mentally, that's a really good thing. And so I'd have that kind of in background, even when I had a pacer, I just put it in my front pocket and listen to it. It was great. So this is the summary of what I've got on my list of things when things go wrong. So I've got quotes. Ken Clover, he's the founder of the Leadville 100. He's got a lot of like, don't be a wuss kind of mentality, but that's what it takes. I've got like just things to remember. And then like I had a list of dedications, like, oh, this is tough. I'm going to think about, I'm going to dedicate this next mile to this person or, this group of people or something like that. And so I had a list of those. I reminded myself to be patient, because last year when I was having trouble, I didn't give myself a chance to get out of it. One thing that'll happen, I mean, you'll have valleys, and you'll have lots of valleys during these things where you just feel horrible. A little food, and just keep going, don't push yourself, and you will often recover. And it's hard to imagine, like, as bad as you're feeling, that you're going to feel better during the same event without quitting. But it happens. And I know this, and I've known it from other hundreds, but you have to have patience for that to come into effect. Because you could be in the valley and you could be feeling bad for hours, literally for hours, and you can come back from it. And then when in doubt, when everything's going horribly wrong, just going to sit down, I'm going to have a beer and take it easy. Luckily, I didn't have to get to that this year, but last year that probably would have saved my race and would have kept me going. And then don't forget to laugh. I mean, I'm out there to have fun. I mean, we're out there to see this, but ultimately I'm going to have fun. And so this year we did some laughing. So I had to gear up, get some new stuff. Last year it didn't work, so you need new stuff. And so, I did update my pack to the, the 2016 version of the same pack I had before. I have my new trekking poles, which I'd had trekking poles last year that were carbon. They're nicer, they're more expensive, but ultimately I found them more flimsy and fragile, and actually broke one. And so at the Never Summer, I broke one, so I replaced them. Just got the aluminum poles, which I've actually been much happier with. I did get the new headlamp of Awesome, which is cool. I love it because you look down, it gets dim, and you look up and it gets bright. It's like, ooh, you can play with this for hours. It turns out there's a good story to that one too. My friend was giving away, she had like a big bag of gels, and I was like, well, okay, sure. I mean, I've had them before, but I didn't really subsist off of them. And the other kind of goo gels, I knew them, but a lot of them have caffeine and they get really kind of hard to take after a while. But these turned out to be just amazing. I have used them some, but not extensively. And so I had this huge bag of gels, and I just like, oh, well, I separated everything into like little baggies that I could just grab and go, but then ended up raiding all those to get these particular gels out. And I take them with me and hoard them because they were that good. Also behind the heads there's some of the run goo, which is this stuff you put on your feet. It's a very thick, pasty stuff to keep down blisters. They had some of it. They had similar stuff last year, and I felt it worked really well. And the stuff is amazing. It's great. And then, honey stinger waffles, because man cannot live off of gels alone. You need waffles. But that's generally some of the new stuff. But most of the stuff I've had is tried and true. So this is one of the tougher spots because you have 20 miles to cover between aid stations, and it could take you 6 or 7 hours. And if it's daytime, it's going to get hot. You're going to need water. Some of the places you could filter water, but usually I don't want to mess with it. So I just usually brought enough water. And for me, that meant a bladder, which unfortunately mine was leaking. I didn't know about that. The bite valve was. And so basically it would just leak all day, every day. It was awesome. I bring lots of gels and Stinger waffles. Last year at one section, I ran out of food. And that's when I had the Baby Ruth of awesome that someone gave me because I had 5 more miles to go, which is at least an hour, 2 hours. And I'm out of food. And I just begged someone, like, do you have something to eat? And they gave me a couple of Baby Ruth bars, which were, at the time, this is a miracle food. You should always have a light with you. Even during daylight, you don't know if things are going to go wrong. So I had a little mini light with me all the time. I had extra socks in case I needed to swap out because I had a particularly bad blister or something like that. Jacket, I usually just left for times when I knew I was going to be in the evening. I didn't bother, and it was pretty hot. It was like in the 80s. I'd always have arm warmers and a buff because you could get windy on some of the ridges. Ginger helps with the stomach, but I didn't really have any stomach issues this year. And I think that's because I was going so slow. I would have caffeine with me. That's my, like, in case of emergency, break glass. But I really left that until the later days. I had a safe amount of ibuprofen, so I wouldn't go nuts with it. But occasionally you take a couple of those because they help with the swelling and stuff. I always had my mini tool with me, which I didn't use much except at one aid station when I'd eaten some food. And I have a bad food pocket, and the stuff gets in there. It's terrible. And I didn't have any floss, so I cut up a glove and pulled it apart using my knife and used it to get the food out of there. So I was like, yes, mini tool to the rescue. Things like a car, you need lubrication. So I have Desitin with me. You can put it on your feet or elsewhere that you have chafing. I always had a phone because it has an app that I wrote. So I have a custom app that I wrote mostly for running these things. They're mostly about staying on the course and seeing what the profile looks like. I have my GPS watch. I know I have my Delorme, and then something else, which I don't know what that is, but it's a battery. It's a backup battery, so that if my watch or headlight got low, then I can charge it. As a matter of fact, the one thing I love about my watch. So this is a little older model. It's the Garmin 910. The battery, when I first got it, would last about 21, 22 hours. Now it lasts, 17, 18, which is probably enough for most people, I suppose. As it turns out, it doesn't really last the whole race. So the cool thing about this watch is that when you hook it up to charger, it says charging, and it'll just keep recording. So I can just hook this up, run a cord down into my pocket where a battery is, and it'll keep charging and keep track of stuff. You can't see. It just says, hey, I'm charging. You can't see what your pace is. You don't know any of that. But it takes about 20 minutes, maybe 25, and then you're back up to a charge where you're fine again. Unfortunately, newer models have since changed that behavior, and it automatically pauses the watch, which I find super annoying. So I'm sticking with this one for now. So this is finally get to race morning. I did get an amazing night's sleep. I fell asleep during the Broncos game, which, I like football, but hey, I was ready to sleep. Got up, had a good breakfast, got the foot and body lube, phone charged, everything's all ready to go. And I felt like this, you're just like, well, I have more pockets to put more crap. And, the first day you end up having an aid station and then like a really small aid station. And then you're out there for a very long time and it's really hot and dry. And so I just felt like everything was crammed into every nook and cranny. So that's what the start of the race looks like. We wore our Dirty 30 shirts. Great race. You guys should all sign up and do that in the fall. It's fantastic. And then there's the crowd at the start. There were 103 people starting the race. So it was a pretty good crowd. I think that's one of her bigger crowds so far. And then here in the corner, kind of blurred out and stuff. But, this is us starting up the hill. and getting ready to go. See if I can get a better picture here. So as promised, everybody else is ahead and I am walking in the back. And these two guys are the cutoff guys. And I don't know if you can see what they're holding in their hands, but as we walk through the starting line, they each pull out a beer out of their back and crack it open, because this was their challenge. And we'll get to that later. But that's how they started the race. And so, this is just going up the first climb, and, you're already getting some good views back across the lake. And if you see that peak in the middle over there, that's Spooner Summit, I believe, which I'll get to in about 3 days. And it's kind of intimidating because if you can't really see it, but off to the side here is the lake, and you got to go all the way around to get up to that one. And then from that one, you still have to get all the way back to where you are now. This is just the typical trail we went up at the beginning. A lot of amazing trees and forests, and it's hard not to be happy in that kind of environment. It's great. It's another just random view. I think that's up probably looking towards Truckee Valley, I'm pretty sure. This was all in the first few miles of the course. Now this one, wow, if you got sharp eyes, in the top middle of the screen, you can see a little blue lake. Looks pretty far away. It's really far away. That's Loon Lake. And in about 30 miles we'll be there. And that's something like, oh, well, that seems kind of far. It is kind of far, but you can see how dry and desolate it gets out there. But that was all on the first day. So I did get a nice picture. This is the race director. She's a little crazy, but this is her Catwoman outfit that she decided to wear at the aid station. And she was making everybody hamburger wraps and with avocado and bacon, which were amazing. And so, again, I took it easy, but even so, I started getting a hot spot on the first climb. I'm like, oh, this is not great. So I had to stop and deal with it. And then at the aid station, they had Coke, which I always drink at these things, and they had Fireball whiskey. And I'm like, let's get this race started right. And so I actually did that. And there's good reasons for it, which I'll cover later. But I think just about every aid station, I had either a beer or a little shot of whiskey or tequila or whatever they had. Oops. So this is what we covered in the first section. This is going out of Homewood, and this was the first day's grind. So we covered 63 miles of backcountry stuff. A lot of it was, well, I shouldn't say a lot of it, but maybe a tenth of it. No, it's got to be more of a quarter of it was like rough Jeep trails. And I got some pictures of it because there's some Jeep roads, and we took advantage of the fact that they were there. So it's kind of hard to settle into a stride, and then because of the Jeeps, it'd get really dusty, and that dust would get into everything, and it would just start chewing up your feet. And so you had to be really careful. And this is one of the things I was referring to. I mean, my heel blister was getting worse. It wasn't feeling good. So some random runner who's going by, he's like, hey, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to fix up my heel. And he's like, dude, I got the stuff you need. And so he pulls out, this guy in a kilt, by the way, but he pulls out his backpack. He goes fishing in there, and he goes, yeah, this stuff is amazing. He's like, put a couple strips on there, you'll be fine. And, the stuff, it was great because it did last until mile 103 before I finally replaced it. It was fantastic. But, I mean, just some random guy I've never met. It's his own race. He's stopping and to interrupt and make sure his fellow runner is doing okay. So I burned through a backlog of audiobook or of podcasts and started an audiobook and listened to that and just kind of had a good time hiking through the woods. I made it to Rubicon aid station, which is at mile 18. And that's when I had a beer and a handful of Oreos and set out to finish the rest of the day and was feeling really good. So this is what some of those Jeep roads look like. I don't know if you can see that the picture on the left there. It's just rocks. Sections of it were like that, and then the other side, it's a little hard to see, but this is like maybe an inch or 2 inches of just dust and silt. And so, the conditions of the trails here were a little rough, but just had to know that it was going to happen. This is more of the rocky trails. There's this cool bridge back there, which this crosses the Rubicon Creek. So I continued, you just took it easy on all the climbs. I never really pushed. So when I say taking it easy, like on the flat spots, when I jog, it was probably 15-minute miles, sometimes down to 13, which is pretty slow for me. And then on the climbs, I'd dip down to like 20-minute miles or something. So you're going about 3.5 miles an hour. Maybe you can cover 4 miles if sections were good. We got to Tell's Creek, which was a cool aid station just back in the middle of nowhere. And they had like hot soup and just super helpful, useful people, and changing socks constantly. I change socks, I'd wipe off my feet, I'd put on a new layer of lube. And that really helps keep the feet in good shape, because your feet for this kind of long race are really going to take a beating. And so I was descending one of these Jeep trails in the middle of nowhere, and there are Jeeps on them and they're using them and they're having a good time too. And most of them were really like, they were very encouraging, very positive of what we were doing. And this is probably I'd say about 11 p.m., so it's gotten dark, been going along in the dark for a while, coming down this trail, and this Jeep comes up. So I kind of scoot over to get out. So I'm still going, but I'm off the trail, off the beaten path. And this guy says, "Yeah, you're doing great." And he's yelling, "Yeah." He's just screaming. It's like, "Dude, you want a beer?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want a beer." And so he just offers me a beer out of his, the one he's got. And I'm like, he's like, "It's sorry, it's a Coors Light." I'm like, "It's right now with this dust." And it was still felt very hot. And so I had about half the beer, and it was really good. And it's like, it's nice to have that kind of encouragement from the fans out there. And then we got to descend into, let's see, where is this one at? So I got a headlight on. Yeah, this must have been out of Tell's Creek. Yeah, this is kind of out in the back middle of nowhere. But, this is kind of the rocky stuff that you get to run on. This was actually a pretty nice section. It was cool because you were never really alone if you knew where to look. There are like cool snake on the ground and these spiders that were just amazing. And I love these huge, I think they're called Jerusalem crickets. They're really big. And so I'd be wandering around, oh, look at that, bugs and stuff. And so that's what I like insects. So I'd stop and take pictures of them, watch the snake crawl away and stuff. But so then I get to Wright's Lake, which you're most of the way to the first sleep station. And I got there and I realized I actually felt pretty good. I'd been going slow and everything. And I get there and they got all these chairs, and in all these chairs, it just looks like a refugee camp. It's terrible. Everybody's got these wool blankets wrapped around themselves, and they're shivering and they're cold and they look all beat up. And I'm like, whoa, you guys know you still got a long ways to go, right? So I managed to find a chair kind of outside the thing because there's only one left. And, I had a hamburger and avocado. And then I did, because it was night, I said, okay, well, I'm going to have a Starbucks because I got about 6 hours to go to get to this next aid station. And I know it's a tough climb. And I know that in that 6 hours, whatever caffeine in the Starbucks is going to just be gone anyway. And then there was another runner named Darrow, and I ran with him for a few miles. We came to an intersection. This is where having the phone and the app and kind of being prepared was really good, because someone had removed or messed with the markings. And you get into this intersection, it just was not clear which way to go. So there's like 6 guys going back and forth going, I don't know which way to go. And they'd run off that way for a little bit. Like, no, I don't see any markers. And they'd come back, and I'm like, pull out my app. I'm like, well, I think it's that way. And so we went that way. And for a long time, we weren't seeing markers. And so I pull it out. I'm like, it still says it's this way. So let's keep going. And it was about a mile and a half later before we saw a ribbon to confirm we're on the right way. And that's almost 20-30 minutes before you see anything. And you have this intersection, and for that whole time you're unsure. And later on the road, we ran into people who had gone the wrong way for a couple of miles and then had to come back. So you're adding 4 miles to this race, which is already very long. It's like, ooh, that sucks. But at this point, you come to this one of the few paved sections of the whole course, which for a 200-mile race, there's only a few paved sections. That's pretty damn good. I remember this last year because I was really having a hard time keeping awake, and they had sealed up the cracks with this black bitumen or whatever they use, and those things every once in a while just start wiggling away, and it's like, I had all these hallucinations. I knew I was in a bad state, and this was the first night last year, and it's like, well, this is not going to go well. But this year, I just kind of strolled down it, and we jogged at a pretty good pace. And it's about 5K of pavement, and we got back onto some trails, and it was great. We did have to struggle up this thing called the Lover's Leap Trail, but by that time had kind of a little pack of people. I know there are like 5 or 6 of us together, and I'm really good at climbing because I get my trekking poles and just kind of scoot moseying up the hill. And I got to the top and decided I'm just going to wait for those guys. So I took a little nap, and I can take these 5 to 10 minute naps, and they really do a great job of just resetting my whole mental state. Because you just wake up like, oh, I feel way better than when I lay down. And then I finally made it to this Sierra at Tahoe, which is a ski area, and was able to get my first like real nap. So I was able to, so I got about 90 minutes of nap, and then someone was tapping me awake, and I was like, why the hell is someone bothering me? I thought it must have been my pace or something. It turns out I had like this back spasm, like this twitch in my muscles was, and it was bad enough it actually woke me up. But I thought, okay, well, it's about time I need to get up anyway. So I was able to change clothes, and I had this decision like, well, do I trust that my bag is going to get to the right spot because my crew was supposed to move it? And I thought, I'm just not feeling it. So I kept my headlight and my hat and stuff. I just threw them in my bag. It added a little extra weight. But it turned out that bag did not get moved as expected. So it was a good thing because I would have someone would have had to been rushing around to find it and stuff. And it ended up in Sacramento. So anyway, I did eventually get it back. And apparently I just missed a bear, which is kind of scary because I'm sure the bear saw me, but I never saw it. But a lot of people came by saying that they saw the bear. And let's see, I started having these short naps during the day where I would just lay down. I tell my pacer, like, okay, I'm at the end of my rope. That looks like a very nice place to lay down. I'm just going to lay down there for 10 minutes. Okay. You just keep an eye on the watch, and in 10 minutes, we'll just get up and go again. And I did this maybe 3 or 4 times the whole time I was out there. And every time I'd wake up at like either 8 or 9 minutes, and I'd wake up just feeling, oh, that was great. That's fantastic. Ready to go again. But it's funny, just that much of a reset is fantastic. This is my friend Chris, who's in Sacramento. He's the guy who ended up with my drop bag for some reason. And then this is one of the few times I actually used the creeks to fill up my water. And this, you can see just a bunch of runners here getting their water and stuff. And then it was nice to just get your buff because it was really hot at this point. And there's a number of people. I don't know if you can see them. Like everybody has trekking poles. I can see like 3 pairs of them here. But I'd say probably 80% of the people had trekking poles for this race. I used my trekking poles for easily 90% of the course. The only times I didn't was right at the beginning because in the crowds, I don't want to hit anybody, and I didn't really need them. And then during one of the mornings, it got really cold, and I didn't have gloves, so I just pulled up my sleeves and just threw my trekking poles in the back. And it was a fairly moderate section as far as climb goes, so I just put them in the back for a few hours. One of the big things, the lessons that you can learn is, as I'm going along, I had a pacer on this section who was a little slower, not a great trail runner or ultra person or anything like that, but it was a great chance to kind of bank some energy. And in this kind of thing, you want to bank energy, don't bank time. Banking time is going to cost you way more in the end than you would think. It was a long, hot climb, so I just kind of stayed back with her, it almost made this section almost restful. I was almost able to recover at the beginning more than I put into it. But, we kept the pace down. We finished the section. I remember last year, the section I had just been hallucinating like crazy. There's all these trees and rocks, and any kind of weird textures would just like swim and move and transform into things. And you're like, ugh. And you just know you're struggling at that point. But this year it was great. I just had no problem. We finished up the section. She had started playing some music on her phone, and, we're doing karaoke down the side. Sorry, Matt. We're doing karaoke down the side of the hill, just singing. But hey, it was just us, so nobody else could hear. And this is when I got to Armstrong Pass. I'm like, oh, my big toe's kind of hurting. And I look, and I have this enormous blister forming on the side of it. So this was the first of many times where we taped up that toe. And it was the same toe that last year I thought had fallen off because we used black tape, and I was in a really bad mental state. And at Armstrong Aid Station, it was about 20 miles or Heavenly aid station. It was the middle of the night, and I looked down. I could not see my toe, and could have swore it had fallen off somewhere along the way, and we should find it because we could probably still attach it. And this is a real thing that happened last year. But this year, nothing like that happened. It just looked like I was forming an 11th toe on the side. So this section, so we're coming back to the lake. So in the overall map, we really dipped down quite far south of the lake. And we're finally back up to where you could actually see the lake. And Heavenly is the name of a ski area there. And you just kind of come down. So it gives you an idea for how rugged some of these peaks are. Ski areas, basically. I took another short nap, just a few minutes. It was good. And as I got up to leave that spot, another runner would come and like, this is the best spot right here. Because we'd been on the side of this hill where there really wasn't many places to lay down. We found a really nice spot. I just laid down there, took a nap. It was fantastic. And so like the next runner was coming. She was going to take a nap there. I could see other runners in the distance. It's one of the few times when and that day I could see runners, and that was like, oh, well, look at that. We can kind of chase after that person. And so we'd kind of use them as a lure to pull us along. And then he would like, I don't know, he'd speed up or we'd slow down. We'd lose him again. And then finally at some point, middle of the night, we found him just sleeping next to the trail. Like, got him. But I wasn't even trying to pass people, but it's like, oh, we finally achieved that. Also, getting back to the headlight, I was walking along in the middle of the night. My head was kind of drooping, getting a little tired. And I see this sudden bright flash and I hear some rustling. And I actually jumped, like startled. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And my pacer's like, I didn't see anything. What did you see exactly? And I said, oh, I saw this bright flash and I heard these sounds. And she's like, I didn't see anything. I think you're fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it was only like maybe 15 minutes later, I realized this headlight, when the battery gets low, it does this like blinking. It flashes really bright. And I just happened to be looking down at the ground when it happened. And it startled me out from falling asleep on my feet, I guess. But I did make it to Heavenly. So 103 miles, we're halfway through in 38 hours. And, this is where I took my first good nap. And so this is what that section looked like. That was my pacer. She's great. Keep her around. But you can see there wasn't really good places to lay down on the course there. It was really pretty though. The course just kept going up and up and up. And you can see back into Desolation Wilderness a little bit back there. And then this is the high point of the course, the entire course, about 9,700 feet. And just off behind me there is Friel Peak, which you could see. And we joked about walking up to it and decided against it because it probably wouldn't be a great idea. There's more of the course. It was just really, really a cool bit of the course there. And then you can finally, as evening came, you can finally see Tahoe again. We were finally in view of it. See it off in the distance. And so Heavenly, in this case, it was not only ski area, it was food and a long nap. So we came in, we had some good laughs and some more Fireball whiskey. And I had 11 toes because that blister just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so you could see this bulge in the side of my toe going, oh, that's going to be really bad. And yeah, actually lay down to take a nap. And there's some of the food. They made the best food. They had like some grilled cheese and ham sandwiches and just anything you can imagine. It was great. And then I slept in the back of the van because then I didn't have to deal with other people getting out of the tents and stuff. But you're that tired, you can sleep anywhere. And then this is getting up in the morning. So we got up about 2:45 and got ready to go. And then I felt like a new man. 3 hours of sleep was like, I am ready to go. And this is my pacer, Dr. Nikki, who is just super funny. And so she was a good sport who would get up early, and she did a great job out there. So from here, we started going back up onto Spooner Pass, and it was great because I had someone to riff with, and we laughed and told stupid jokes. And this is the section where last year the Baby Ruth had kind of turned me around for a little bit, and we decided, like, I got so excited about seeing the spot where I got the Baby Ruth that I was just pumped up and full of energy, and we decided it was not just a Baby Ruth. This is a magic Baby Ruth because it's working a year later and I don't even have it with me. And, it's just that kind of jokes and riffing probably seems a lot funnier when you're there and you haven't slept much. But this was a really good smooth section and I didn't really have much trouble this year. Whereas last year I really had a lot more trouble in this section because I was really just worn down. But we covered this 20 miles in like 6 hours and 15 minutes and came in laughing and smiling and ready to go. We finished in the mid-morning, like 10 a.m. And ready to tackle the next spot. Now, this was another good section with great views of the lake. And you can see we're probably looking over close to where Homewood is. So looking back across the lake where we started the day before, no, 2 days before at this point, going, oh, damn it, now we got to get back there. And then this was getting to the next aid station where I was greeted with, they didn't have Fireball whiskey, but they did have tequila, which is also very good. And spent a lot of time like really just making sure the feet weren't falling apart. I had a little bit of tape here and there, but compared to a lot of people, my feet looked great. I think we drained the blister at this time because we're like, yeah, this thing's not getting any better. So we drained it and then taped it up again, getting ready to go. So the downside of this section, so this is my crew that was with me at the moment. And I love my wife's shirt. That's the one she picked out specifically for this. And so now it's time for a little perspective. So it's easy to lose perspective about like what you're doing when you're out there, So I'm 120 miles into this thing. I'm thinking the next section, it's 20 miles. It's a tough 20-mile section, but I'm thinking it's only 20 miles. But it's only when you're doing something that's 200 miles long that you start to say, it's only 20 miles. And so we had to come to this conclusion that the pacer that I had with me probably just wasn't going to be able to handle the section. And I didn't want to sub in one of the other pacers because I had very specific reasons for where they were. And so I was just going to have to do the section alone, which it's fine. I mean, I signed up for this. This is my race. This is my deal. And I was prepared to take that on. But it's that perspective. Like I couldn't afford to wear out my pacers because as it was, they were already doing quite a bit of distance. And so it's funny how these things can twist your perspective on things. And I just thought that was very interesting that like not everybody can do a 20-mile hike in the middle of daytime when it's hot up a mountain. And then I forgot my trekking poles. But I realized it when I got across the street going, oh, damn it. And this was like this is a pretty good sized road and there's traffic and you're timing it. And you realize, well, I can't really sprint if I had to. So I better get a good spot. I get across there and I go, got to go back and get my poles. I mean, this isn't very far, but oh well. At least I found a pair of poles later that I carried for 14 miles for someone who I had no idea whose poles they were. They're just leaning against a tree. I'm like, hello, are these your poles? Anybody here? All right. So we carried them all the way to an aid station, dropped them off the aid station worker. We just missed that person. So hopefully they got him to the next aid station in time that at least they were able to use them for the final section. So this was the 20 miles I had to do alone. It was hot. I took several naps and I really had a low spot because the pacer again provides that kind of, they provide mental strength when you're just done. But I didn't have anybody. I'd been listening to the audiobook. It was no longer working. It was just like now it was bedtime story, even though this is the middle of the day. So I switched out and started listening to some music, which kind of helped. But then finally, when I got to the top, I just said, look, you're just going to have to get over this. Remember, you've got a great pacer at your next aid station. It's going to be fantastic to see her. Just focus on getting there. And I started going down. My legs started loosening up as I started running. And I was able to complete this 20-mile section in 6 hours flat, mostly because of that downhill. In fact, a lot of people had passed me. They gathered as a group, a lot of other runners. And at one point, I went running past them, and they're like, hey, you're running again. Awesome. Way to go. And they're really supportive, but they're like, yeah, we're not doing that. But I was able to cover that section and get into that aid station. I was all fired up. But then I realized probably should have run the whole thing. I was a little tired. And so this is when things started to get really physically tough. I mean, yeah, okay, 140 miles before that, they were kind of tough, but now it's really tough. This had some really horrible like climbs. I started seeing things that weren't there. We went along the there's a bunch of really nice houses, and you're kind of going along the road there. And some places had like sculptures. I mean, honest to goodness, real sculptures. Some things were just rocks that I thought were sculptures, which were not sculptures. And I'm like, hey, look, it's a hippo. And my wife's like, no, that's not a hippo. It's a rock. I'm like, but I knew that like, okay, caffeine was going to be in play because like we're getting to the point where we're going to get this thing done. The majority was behind me, and there's a horrible, horrible climb in this section, and I knew it. And so I had another can of Starbucks. Those are great, by the way. There's like caffeine, a lot of calories, really bad for you normally, but for these things, they're fantastic. So I had it in the pocket. I'd walk along and I'd pull it out, and my wife said, no, not yet. Okay, so I put it away, and we walked a little bit. And this was a long lead up. It was like 4 miles before we get to the climb. And this whole thing's just playing in my head, like, how far is it? Oh, I better drink my Starbucks. And I pull it out. And she's like, no, put that away. Not yet. So I did like 3 or 4 times where I really wanted this because I was super tired. And finally, we start inching our way through the neighborhood where the climb is. And she's like, okay, go ahead. Yes. So I drink this, and it is amazing. Like 10, 15 minutes later, I feel fantastic. And that's where you get to the worst climb of the race. It is rough. This is like you got to go up 1,500 feet in 1.2 miles. And I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to point it out real quick. But right there, this little white thing, that's a guy sitting on the side of the trail. So there's a guy sitting on the side of the trail. He's about like, I don't know, 20 feet from the bottom. Just sitting there thinking whether he really wanted to do this thing or not. He's like, well, I'm going to fuel up and get some rest. And we just go like, well, good luck, dude. It's not getting any lighter. And he just sat there. We watched him for a while. And I think eventually he got up and got going. But looking up it, the pictures I took can't convey that. You can't really see that dimension in a picture, but it was really rough. And so this is looking back probably from 3/4 of the way. This is the other picture. And there's my wife. You can see how much she has to lean into the slope just to keep from falling off. This was a good 30+%, 35%. It's very loose. It's not very packed. There's no really established trail. It's just kind of choose your own adventure. And so you get to the top of this. Finally, there's some nice views of the lake. Sure, I admit that. And the sun was setting, and it was beautiful and orange. But your real reward was more climbing, because you dip down for a little bit, and then you got this road. You got to go up to this peak, and I wasn't even sure it was a peak because it was dark by the time I got there. But, I had some more hallucinations to keep me company. At one point, I figured we were getting close to the aid station because I saw an RV. And again, it's like, well, there's no RV there. And it's like, what? It's just right there. It turns out it's like there's a log here and another log, and then this log sticking out the side like a wheel. My brain constructed an RV parked in the middle of the woods. And only as you get closer, you're like, oh, no, it means we still have a long way to go, huh? But we made it into what they call the Brockway aid station, or the Brockway B&B, as they like to call it. And they had the most amazing food and probably the best sliders I've had in my entire life. I think I ate 3 of them. They were so good. They were making them fresh right there, grilling them up. And then I had a few of those, and then possibly the best nap of my life too. So I limited myself to another 3 hours. And then this is the section I dropped out on last year. I left this section in the middle of the day, or middle morning on Monday of last year, just dragging and not feeling good. And I made it about 6 miles and decided I'm calling it a day. And so the cool thing about it is I felt pretty good. It was 2:30 in the morning. We left. We got to Watson Lake, where I dropped out last year, and I'm thinking every step beyond this, distance PR. So that was the joke for hours. PR. This is where I found the trekking poles, which I carried with me for 14 miles because like, well, what if they come back? Like, well, we're going to have the trekking poles. And like the person, I guess, just gave up. Even those are like $150 trekking poles. And like, so he's probably glad to get them. We were a little underdressed, and it got really cold up on the ridges. And that's when I stopped using my own trekking poles. So not only did I have someone else's trekking poles, I had mine thrown in the back and just wrapped up and said, whatever, we'll just walk for a while. But when we came into the aid station, we had just spent the last half hour laughing at stupid jokes that we'd been telling the whole time, to the point where they had to get me to stop and calm down before they could tape up my feet, because I couldn't sit still. I had tears coming out of our eyes. And I realized that probably none of the things that we said were funny at all. But it doesn't matter, because we had a great time. And so from here, I got one more section with my wife to pace me. This was some amazing forests, they've got these great big trees, and you got these great views. And I saw a mountain biker who wasn't there. I saw smoke from a campfire that also wasn't there. And I saw, it looked like a couch in the middle of the woods, and my wife's like, "That's a rock." Damn it. So you could really see where my brain was going. But at the same time, I felt really good. Relatively speaking, of course. I did get to the point where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take that nap now. And I just laid down. And while I was out, some other runner had come up behind us, and he's like, "How is he doing? Is he doing great?" And I thought, "I hope he's doing great. I just love this race. This race is great." And I could kind of hear him talking, but he was super happy. And he's like, "I love the race where you can just lay down on the side of the trail and nobody cares and people check up on you." And he seemed really energetic. I was just happy to let him go. We did almost take a wrong turn, and luckily because I like just staring at the sign, and it says, it's got the sign, because I've seen these signs and I've read them. It's warning, there's this long race, and please don't mess with our markers and everything. And I'm reading it, and as I'm going by, I'm just keep going down the trail, and it's like I missed the fact that there's this big sign that says wrong way, don't go this way, and I just do because I'm just out of it. And my wife's like, "Oh, I think we need to go that way." So we had to go back up just a little ways and got the right trail. So that was really good. And then that was the last climb on that section. Was, it had some, like I said, some really good forests. It's a bit rocky. My feet at this point were pretty trash. They weren't like torn up like blisters, but they were just sore. Like every once in a while, it would just be agonizing every time you take a step. So I had to remind myself, like, okay, every agonizing step, I visualized it like someone's like blacksmithing my belt buckle, and every one of those is like another good hammer blow of like excellence into the belt buckle. And I was like, "Oh, but that hurts. It hurts." But you had some really, really just amazing views. This is looking back into Tahoe after we finally crested over and then limped our way back to the aid station. So finally, at the last aid station, saw the full crew there. We came in singing. Last year, we did the Hood to Coast relay together. And there's this great song, which is not safe for work, the Pterodactyl song. It's by the Oatmeal, if that gives you any idea. And so we came in just singing that and laughing and happy, and just everybody at the aid station was just like, "You guys look like you're having a great time." So we drained my blister again. And I think this is like the third or fourth time. And it just, at this point, it's like going from just like liquid to like looking pretty awful. But another layer of tape, because you only got 15 miles to go. Just get it going. And they had soup, and then it was time to start on the victory lap of 15 miles. Only 15 miles. And then here's the village people with their village idiot. This is the full crew back together. So the guy in the yellow, he actually had paced me for 13 miles Saturday morning, went home, went to San Francisco to see an opera, helped his girlfriend move, saw another opera the next night, and then spent the full day of Monday, or most of it, working, and then came back out, and I was still on the course and still running. If that gives you a little perspective of how long this thing went. But so, you gotta remember that 15 miles is still a pretty good distance. And I was expecting to take about 6 hours. And the first 7 miles have this very gentle climb, which really is just a tease, because there's a nasty, nasty climb coming. And so you just want it to get over with. It's like trying to rip off the Band-Aid. And finally we get there, and it's 3 miles of just really horrible climbs. But at that point, it's like, well, we just have to get up this, and then we're almost done. But it was nice to, you can lock on the fact the finish is there. You just got to get there. And so that really kind of became a good motivation. It did get cold. And in fact, we got done, I did get done at 11 p.m., which was dark, but we were already getting off the top of the mountains earlier than that. But people who came in after us, apparently it snowed on them. So that's how cold it got that night. It was pretty cool. And so what was funny is we did the last 8 miles were the same as the first 8 miles, except we're going the opposite direction 3 days later, 3.5 days later. So like you kept thinking, well, this doesn't really look that familiar. I don't remember any of this because you just came flying through it and just not even thinking about it. It was pretty easy. And now it's like, oh, this is taking forever. I don't remember this turn. I'll be in the right spot. Just calm down. It's okay. Just keep going down the hill. But we finally kept going. This is the this doesn't show up either. Damn people connected. This is the race photographer was up on the hill. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take your picture. Don't look over here. Just run straight. And so you do that, and you get this cool effect of your light going by. And if you can see the blue, blob in the front, that's me, and the orange is Chris, and you can see the trail of our headlight. And so it's kind of this cool picture. And this was apparently right at the 200-mile mark because the race is a little longer because, well, yeah, it's close enough, right? 205 miles. Who's counting? So you got a good hour and some change to get back down from there, but it was pretty cool. So finally finished the final 4-mile descent, and it was both nice to know that this is it, but it just seemed to go on forever. My feet were amazingly sore. I was just like, this has got to end. I can't keep standing. But we got into a good rhythm. We made good progress. And then at mile 204, someone had set up a whiskey station on the trail, and it says 1 mile to go, stop and celebrate now. And they had Fireball whiskey and shot glasses and a stack of beers, and you kind of choose yourself. And so we stopped and had a full shot, and it was great. And then a short time later, my wife had come up the trail, and so we did almost a mile with her. We jogged to the finish, sat down, had a beer and some pizza. And that's this is the whole crew at night. And then let's see, it did go eerily smooth this year. I had no major disasters, which was kind of scary. In a lot of ways, it was actually easier than the Black Hills 100, which I almost did not finish. I almost got cut. I just missed that snowfall, which was pretty cool. But just to know that the weather can vary that much, I was very physically and mentally exhausted, but just happy to have accomplished it. And I left them out, but I brushed my teeth like at least every morning and every night. So because the gels are nasty. But I was so tired when I got back to our hotel, I was just lying in the side of the sink, brushing my teeth, trying not to fall asleep. But the next day and that night, my feet were sore, they're swollen. I still get like occasionally my toes are a little tingly, but really not much muscle soreness or anything. I was a lot more sore after my marathon this year because you're just going at such a slow pace. So now he's like, but why would you do this? And I just have to say, I like adventure. I've always liked that. And it's like, well, this is an adventure times 20. It's a good challenge to know, like, hey, can I do this thing? And last year I wasn't able to do it, but I went back and faced it and got it done. It was a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of the time out there, I was just enjoying myself, at the woods and the views. And I like being outside. And I would have a cabin outside right now if I could figure out how to make a living out of it. And then there's the satisfaction of having done it. When I first heard about the race, I heard about it in 2013. And there's a lottery to get in the first year. And it was full, and I didn't get in. So imagine, but she had like a limit of like 60 entrants. And then it sounded like a really good idea. And so then I signed up for the 2015 race. I still didn't. So I missed the 2014. Started thinking about it in 2013. And so finally, it was like a 3-year kind of thing that's been kicking around the back of my head before I finally got done. And then this is kind of like one of the things that ran through my head. This is a classic quote, but I think this is really why I quit in 2015. I mean, it really came down to like the fear of it was fear of not finishing, which I think led to the failure itself. And it was really my own state of mind and uncertainty about the rest of the course that, I had to I wasn't able to deal with. And then this year going back and doing it again really made a huge difference. And so, you know, approaching the race with a different attitude. Like I joked around about having a beer and a whiskey, and it's like that was kind of my way of thumbing my nose at the race. Like, I'm just going to go out here and have a good time. I'm going to forget about the 600-pound gorilla in the room and just enjoy one section at a time. Celebrate each section as it comes. And that's what that was about. And I really realized that most of the difficulty was really from inside. You know, I trained enough. I was probably in as good a shape last year as I was this year, but I just wasn't mentally ready for it. The best reason? Sweet belt buckle, which I'll wear forever. And then there's these guys, and this is the postscript. This is the final guys. I got to talk about these guys. So I started with these guys, chatted with them all the way up the hill. This guy here in the beard, he was the volunteer sweeper. So making sure nobody died or, you know, if they fell on the course, then he would make sure they got to the aid stations. And so he'd get to the aid stations and he'd wait till the cutoff to leave. So he always knew he was in the back. And he volunteered for this job, but he thought, well, I can't just do that. I got to make it interesting. So along the course, along this course of 200 miles, he set a challenge to himself to finish 50 beers, which he did. And they had punch cards with them, which they'd punch out as they finished the beers. And these two guys, as you see, they're walking up the hill. They cracked open their first beer at the starting line. And if you look in his hand there at the finish, because I came back the next day, that's him with his final 50th beer, which he finished right there at the finish line. It was amazing. I would never do that. But still, my hat goes off to those guys. So that's all I have. Any questions?
How long did you sleep
After? I went to bed about probably midnight, and then I woke up at 7. Had some breakfast. Didn't sleep a lot. I've been like fatigued a bit, and then, you know, I slept a fair amount. Like I came into work the next day. Well, I went to the award ceremony and all that stuff, and I came into work the next day on Thursday. And I went to the meditation room for half an hour because I was pretty worn out, but not too much. What's that?
Just out here, how well marked was the course? And when you said like that woman founded the race,
yeah,
200 miler, and like what did she help kind of blaze that trail? Like how?
So so the course was very well marked, like 99% of it or 90% of it. There was just one section, as far as we know, somebody either pulled down the ribbons or something. That happens on some of these races. You just have to be prepared for that. It sucks, but it happens. They had these great markers, which were, you know, 2 kinds of ribbons together and a clothespin, and they had reflective tape on the clothespin and then reflective strips on the ribbons. And so during the day, they were easy to spot, and at night, you could see them forever away. The woman who started the race, she just kind of, you know, they just start with the basic idea of most of it's the Tahoe Rim Trail, but what is that? Only 150, 170 miles. You can't have that. You need a nice round number. So she decided to add this whole loop down to Desolation Wilderness and then back up to the Incline Village and stuff. And so she pieced it together and scouted this stuff out. But she did it as a fast packing trip by herself, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, and decided, oh yeah, you could finish this in 4 days. And so that's what she kind of picked. Since then, she's had she started a race in Washington called the Bigfoot 200. And then she's starting one around Moab, which I think will be the Stephen Jones 200. So Stephen Jones is a guy who had run several of her races and unfortunately got caught in an avalanche a couple of years ago and died. So that's I actually ran with Stephen last year. So I guess it was just this last winter. But so that's why she's got the Stephen Jones aid station and stuff.
Are you doing this one again next year?
Well, it's a bit much to ask of everybody around me, so I probably will skip for a while. Although some of these guys, they're like, hey, I'm going to do the 1,000, you know, the 1,000-mile thing next year. And they're like, because they found 5 200-mile races in the U.S., and they're going to do them all. And I'm like, you guys are insane. I might go, there's the Colorado 200, which I might go like camp out and volunteer in an aid station, but probably won't do a 200 for a few years because it's a lot of time away from the family and training and stuff like that. So that's probably what more than anything else kind of drives that decision. You got to have balance. I went a little nuts on this one. But yeah, I mean, that aside, I would totally do it again. It's great. Or at least the Bigfoot. I would probably try that one. You guys should sign up. There's still openings.
So you really only had like 3 hours of sleep during the
I had an hour and a half the first night, and then 3 hours each the second 2 nights. So 7.5 plus a few 10-minute naps. So I'm thinking 8.5 total, maybe. So, yeah. Not too much caffeine. Caffeine comes back to haunt you. It's great for a while, but it wears off and you're kind of in a worse spot than you started.
Did they make anything strong?
Thought about it.
How many miles did the Pacers help you out?
So let's see. It started about mile 63. So let's see, it's 140 less 20, so 120 miles. Yeah. So Nikki did about 40 miles. Kumi did 45. Drusha did 10. Chris did about 30, something like that. I'd have to go back and add it all up. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it was honestly 20-minute miles. I think I averaged a moving time probably about 21 over the course of the race. So,
what kind of food did you eat most of the time?
hamburgers. And when I got there, the hamburgers were great. They would have hamburgers with bacon and avocado, and I probably ate that 3 or 4 times a day. I like hamburgers, so they're pretty good. But they had like sandwiches and grilled cheese and pastas. Chicken soup was really good. But that's mostly what I ate. And then when I was between aid stations, it was those gels and waffles. And then I'd bring some fun snacks like Cheez-Its or Oreo cookies, sometimes Pringles. I don't know, whatever kind of struck my fancy.
You bathe? Shower?
I had wet wipes that I used extensively. One of the things too, though, so first of all, I'm not really a heavy sweater. I'm not. And my goal was to keep the pace down where I wasn't just like drenched in sweat. That meant I was going too hard. And so, yeah, I mean, I would use a wet wipe and kind of get my legs and my face and body and stuff. And then I changed shirts probably 5 or 6 times. Changed shorts just once. Just tough it out. Wasn't that bad.
What were you wearing to protect your ankles? I know some of that stuff.
Oh, I have some black gaiters that Kumi got me. They're just a little bit better than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
So so I wore these shoes. I wore these shoes for about 120 miles. These are Lone Peak 3.0s. They're fantastic. And for 120 miles, they're great. And I switched to some Torrens, which have a little bit more room in them in the toe box and a little cushiony. And then went back to the Lone Peaks, a different pair, for a little bit and decided, nah, I'm going to finish off with the Torrens. So with the Torrens, traction is a little bit of an issue. But when you're going as slow as we were and I had trekking pole, it was worth it because the toe box kept like my toes from being torn up. And so there was a big blister on the side of my toe. I lost some skin on the back because that was a blister that kind of ripped off. And then between my toes kind of got trashed out. And so there was I peeled and lost all the skin there, but wasn't as bad as a lot of people's feet, which really, really look bad after a lot of these things. It looks really bad. So I felt pretty fortunate. These trekking poles are, if you've ever gone hiking or whatever. So these are super ultra light. I mean, these are the aluminum ones, which I found just better than the carbon ones. They're cheaper. They're stronger. I felt they did really, really well. Most people for hiking don't need something like this, but the nice thing is they do very quickly fold up into nothing. And then with that pack that I got, you can actually put them in the front if you want. Just a place to strap them. This is my new pack that I got this year So it's done. Yeah, needs to wash because like goo leaked everywhere on it and stuff. But this one's really good. It's got, you can put a flask up front for like a mix. And then you can just stuff these pockets with gels. And the Nexus 5 fits in this pocket really well. And then I could stuff a lot of food in here. And then like stuff on the sides. So all these pockets, I mean, you can get to them in the front. Whereas last year I had fewer pockets in the front. And so accessing stuff like, oh, you know, there's that thing I want, and I got to take off my pack and go digging around for it. Whereas this was much better. And so in the pack, I'd have like a jacket or something, maybe that I wouldn't grab that often, or maybe grab once. I usually had toilet paper in there, which is really nice, but you had to pack it out, which was not great. And then I would have extra food in there, sometimes some extra water. And then I had my Delorme. You were required to have a tracker with you. Most people have the spots, but I own a Delorme. And so that helped cover the whole race. And the nice thing about the Delorme is I can text out as well as receive with it. So that was really good. It was good to have.
Do you just have like massive battery packs?
No, I used two. One I got at the Google store, which was really nice, and one I bought for a project, a robot that we worked on for a little bit. But usually I didn't need them because when I was taking a nap, I would just hand my phone off. I'm like, okay, charge these things. And so my headlamp, my phone, and my Garmin needed charging. The Delorme needed charging once or twice. But usually those, you know, they'll last once or twice, and then I would just get that recharged by the crew while I was gone. So that worked out really well. And then, yeah, a Nexus 5 in airplane mode, you can have music for 20, 24 hours. It's fantastic. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening.